evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the October 15th, 2015 meeting of the City of Bellingham Planning Commission. There's no one in the audience tonight, but I'll ask everyone to remember to silence their electronic devices who's up here and two presenters. And I think with that, we'll just get going. Heather, please call the roll.
Holly Teishi.
Here.
Garrett O'Brien.
Here.
Tom Grinstead.
Here.
Jeff Brown.
Here.
Steve Crooks.
Here.
Phyllis McKee is excused.
All right, thank you. We have no minutes to approve. We have no public, so we will not have a public comment period. And that will allow us to move right into our public hearing. Unless, Greg, you wanted to speak on a topic other than the school district capital facilities plan.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and introduce things.
All right, let's
Good
do that.
evening, Commissioners. I'm Greg Ockett from the Planning and Community Development Department. We have a little different proposal to present to you tonight. This is a comprehensive plan amendment, which you are all familiar with that process. We process those every year. This one's a little different. This is actually an amendment to the capital facilities chapter of our comp plan. Normally, comp plan amendments are changes in zoning or things like that. This one is actually an amendment to our capital facilities chapter for the Bellingham School District. The Growth Management Act requires jurisdictions to adopt school districts' capital plans into our plan in order for them to be eligible to collect impact fees. And this is the fourth time that we have done this. We did it originally in 1998, again in 2004, and then in 2010, I believe, was the last time. It was actually late 2009. Were any of you on the commission? Tom, were you on the commission in 2009? Yeah, so you might remember this. Yeah, so as I said, we have to adopt the district's capital plan into our plan in order for them to be eligible to collect impact fees. And we have done that. Like I said, this is the fourth time, and we've been collecting impact fees really originally under SEPA in the early 90s. So we've been doing this a long time. So it is a comprehensive plan amendment, just like other ones in respect for the process. The process is the same. You hold a public hearing, make recommendations to council. They'll hold a public hearing and make a final decision. One of the things that's a little different about this one is that, as you'll recall, we've already adopted amendments to our comp plan this year, and normally we're limited to amending our plan once a year under GMA. There is a provision that allows us to amend our plan more than once a year if it's an emergency situation. In this case, because the district missed our round of amendments for this year, we went to council, city council, and said, do you want to add this one to the docket this year, given that the district's plan is going to expire at the end of this year, and the first opportunity we'll have to amend our plan will be when we adopt our new plan in July of next year. So there would be this 6 month or so period where the district would not be eligible to collect impact fees if we don't do this now. And so council felt like that was enough of an emergency to go ahead and put this on the docket and review it now, and that's why we're here. We generally issue, in the last few years, we've issued around 700, or permits for about 700 units. And a lot of those occur in the first half of the year as people want to get going on their projects. And so that 6 month period, if that were to occur where we couldn't collect impact fees, would be a significant financial impact on the district. So at a staff level and also at a council level, we decided, let's go ahead and review this now, and so that's why we're here. I think that's all I needed to say at this point regarding process and why we're here. If you have any questions, please ask. Otherwise, Ron Cowan from the Bellingham School District is here, and he's going to present their plan to you and talk about the process that they go through to develop that plan. Questions at this point?
Anybody have questions for Greg?
Yeah, I've got.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Greg, I'm a little confused about 3 areas of funding. The first of all, I understand that our legislature is in contempt, that they didn't fund, they're not funding education fully. And they're in session and they're trying to work this out. If in fact they come up with whatever plan, whatever number, included within that number, how does that impact this capital facilities plan And how does that impact levy funding that's already been passed, that's in place? I don't understand the relationship between these.
I think I'd let Ron go ahead and answer that question, Steve, if it's okay with you.
You bet. So the McCleary decision really only impacts the general operating budget of the state, and our general fund has no impact on the capital budget, which provides funding for school construction projects. So there's no anticipation we'll receive any additional money from the state as a result of the legislature's ongoing work to comply with McCleary. In terms of levy funding, that's also funding that is solely directed to the district's general fund, and it's not used for capital construction. So if the legislature changes levy rules and laws and changes our levy, again, has no impact on our ability to raise money or move forward with capital projects.
I
That's a
thought
great-
part of that levy was Seaholm High School rebuild. Isn't that correct?
Well, yeah, there's two different things. There's levies, which operate the general fund, and then there are bonds. So there's a distinction. And when you're talking about a levy, I'm assuming you're talking about the district's maintenance and operations levy, which funds the general fund. The bond issue, which was passed in November 2013, sorry, it's just a semantics thing for us probably. Again, there would be no impact of the McCleary decision on school district bonds.
Okay, thank you.
That's a great reminder for us, though, Steve. Impact fees can only be used for capital projects. They can't be used for salaries or books or equipment. They have to be spent on capital facilities alone.
Thank you.
On that topic, I noticed a language change in here in I think it was in the section where we're changing language of the comp plan, and it made it sound like those impact fees could only spend on new capital projects, and it had taken out some references to like repair of or renovation of old buildings. Is that true? That the school impact fee funds can only be spent if we go build like a new high school and not used for maintenance repair?
My understanding is that impact fees can be used for any capital projects that are
Okay.
related to growth. So that could be repair and maintenance of existing schools, or it could be building new schools. The district has used it a lot for portables.
So I might just add that
Yeah.
we wouldn't use impact fees to repair an existing facility. We would only use it to add capacity. So
To an existing
new-
facility?
New classrooms, portables, et cetera.
Thanks. Did you have another question? Oh, okay. Not right now. Why don't we hear from you, Ron, and then there'll probably be some more questions after that.
Great, thank you. I hadn't planned to go through our 35-page capital facility plan, and I'm hoping that's okay with you, but I'll give you a brief summary of the process. So, first of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity to make some brief comments related to incorporating our capital facility plan into the city's comp plan. I appreciate the staff and council's willingness to move this through a somewhat different process and different timeline. As Greg articulated, failing to do that would really reduce some revenue we would have to enhance our capacity. As Greg alluded to, subsequent to the passage of the Growth Management Act in 1990, many cities, including Bellingham, adopted impact fees for things like parks and roads and schools. In an effort to responsibly manage growth and to have new development help pay for their fair share of new public facilities which they will derive benefit from. Specific to school impact fees, as Greg also mentioned, this is the fourth Bellingham School District Capital Facility Plan to come before you and the council later, with earlier adoptions in 1998, 2004, and 2009. And I want you to know we take this process very seriously, and to that end, we invest significant resources in both time and dollars to ensure the plan is complete, and the proposed fees are based on actual data. And specifically, we employ a third-party professional demographer to develop enrollment projections independent of our work. That demographer uses recent birth rates, development information that's available from both the city and the county. The demographer develops three projections, a low, a mid, and a high range forecast, and we have always used the mid-range forecast, and those are the enrollment projections included in the plan before you. We also employ a third-party professional to determine what's called student generation rates. So as we look at new developments, specifically in multi or single-family units, how many students on average are likely to emanate from one of those units? And that enables us then to develop a fee that's based on a per dwelling cost, not a per student cost. And finally, we work closely with legal counsel to make sure that our plan is in compliance with the Growth Management Act. A brief review of the process is our first step is to develop enrollment projections. How many kids do we think are going to be in the district over the next 6 years? Following that, we determine our existing capacity, look at all of our classrooms, balance that off with our service level standards, class size, if you will, and then compare the two. Is there a need? Is there a surplus in capacity or a need? And as this plan identifies over the next 6-year period, there will be a need for additional capacity at elementary and the high school level. We then multiply some costs for the identified projects, and you'll see on our calculation sheet we've identified the cost for a new elementary and a high school because that's where the need is generated. Those are multiplied by the student generation rate to come up with a per dwelling unit cost. That sum is then reduced by state funding assistance that we think we'll receive for projects over that period, and we will receive some funding both at elementary and high level. It's further reduced by the anticipated tax payments that a dwelling will pay on outstanding bonds. And then the board takes that reduced fee and cuts it in half. And they do so in recognition of affordable housing and also to recognize that development only pays a portion of the need for new public facilities and not all. Those calculations, again, are detailed in Appendix A if you care to review those. Prior to requesting the city's consideration of our plan, we conduct an advertised SEPA review prior to the board's adoption so that our citizens have the opportunity to provide comment on our capital facility plan. And finally, as they did in August of this year, our board reviews the proposed capital facility plan in public session and formally adopts the plan. And that brings us to where we are this evening, where we are requesting your favorable consideration of incorporating our capital facility plan into the city's comp plan. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So we could engage in discussion, ask questions. We could offer an opportunity for public comment. There's no public to comment. Greg, do we have to jump through the hoop of formally opening and closing the public comment because it is a public hearing?
Yep.
So let's do that now. So this is a public hearing. We need to provide an opportunity for the public to comment. And there's no one in the audience, but I guess I can ask if anyone would like to comment. Seeing no one, we're going to close the public hearing for this or the public comment section of this public hearing and then move on. And I guess you also received no public comment I saw in the staff report.
That's correct.
So very little public interest in this topic.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Is that typical?
Well, this is the 4th time we've done it, and the first time or two, there's quite a bit of interest in the topic. The impact fees were relatively new, and so it was an educational process for us, for the commission, and for the council, and for the public, and for the development community as well. And they had questions about how the fees were calculated and how they would be applied. And so that we went through a fairly extensive public process the first time or two. You know, we're almost 20 years into this now, and people understand impact fees. They understand how they're calculated. They understand how the money's used. And so I think everybody's fairly comfortable with the way things have been working, at least here in Bellingham.
I have to admit, I was surprised that there wasn't a BIA comment or something from the development industry because there is a change in the impact fee. I just would have thought that they would have made a comment, you know, one going up and one going down, and there's pros and cons in their mind, I'm sure, to both those. And so I was just surprised not to see a comment on that. Does anybody have any questions? And then maybe, if not, we could have a motion and move into discussion. Any questions? Garrett?
Well, I just, this is every 5 years you guys update the plan.
I think it's actually on a 6-year cycle.
And we have the multifamily, you know, the impact fee for the multifamily decreasing pretty significantly at this go around. So what is, from 5 years ago, I guess, the change that really prompted that?
Yeah, that was surprising to us as it is to you. It's just a matter of fewer students being generated from a multifamily unit dwellings when they look at actually what happened over the last 5 years. So we got that initial data and kind of didn't believe it. So then we actually went out to several of the complexes and checked the numbers, and that's what they were. So
You're seeing a lot more multifamily development, you know, right now in our community, and I just hope that that doesn't, you know, leave a shortfall in the budget for capital improvements when, you know, the next 5 years goes, just impact fees collected. I mean, historically, over the last 5 years, have we had adequate funding for, you know, capital improvements? Or, I mean, portables don't seem like, you know, that tells me that things are a bit tight.
You know, we actually have had very adequate funding. Our voters back in November 2013 passed a $160 million bond issue by near a 70% favorable vote. And we all know what that means, right? We voted to tax ourselves so we could do that. So, yes, we've got adequate funding. The state provides some support for us for remodeling and renovation, and so we're in pretty good shape. We've got a great list of projects that we're planning, including the Seaholm High School rebuild. That we'll kick off the planning process for that actually next month.
Excellent. Sorry, I did have one question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Like when you're looking at impact fees and they accrue over time, over a 5-year period, versus a bond that would get passed and be, you know, a substantial amount, you know, maybe for a particular project, you know, what is the general use of, you know, impact fees? I mean, you mentioned, you know, portables, but, you know, as those accrue, does it hit a certain threshold? You know, you've got a certain dollar amount or goal in mind, then you try to allocate it somewhere, or is it just fluid?
Yeah, prior to this plan, we haven't actually used any of impact fees for portables. The reason we included portables in this plan is because if the legislature does in fact provide some funding for reduced class size so we can hire more teachers, I'm going to have an immediate shortfall, and I can't build a school that fast, so this will help us provide that. In particular, we use impact fees for our new schools. You know, their impact fees were used for Birchwood, impact fees, I think the plan before this, Wade King Elementary. Impact fees will be used for Happy Valley Elementary. So, yeah, it's try to put it kind of on the big ticket, bigger projects.
They supplement additional sources of funding.
That's
like
correct.
bonds, so that
Right.
would help determine the bond amount that you would ask for to pass, depending on how much, you know.
You know, they're really, impact fees aren't big enough to have an impact on that, if you will.
Yeah.
We go and ask the voters to approve a bond issue. I need to size that appropriately that I can actually finish that project regardless of whether I get any impact fees or, you know, if development goes down and I don't get them. So I don't really count on them.
Okay.
Otherwise, we won't fulfill our promise to the folks who voted to tax themselves to get these facilities, and so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So-
Thank you.
I actually had a similar train of thought, if I can follow on that. So on table 3, where you have your 6-year finance plan in the capital projects, and the anticipated source of funds says like bonds, impact fees, or state match bonds, impact fees. I kind of had the same question. What part of that is the impact fee? It sounds like it's really predominantly bond and state funds. So the impact fee helps carry over or deal with like a capacity crush if we have a big number coming in.
Yeah, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, since our 2009 plan was adopted, we've collected about $1.7 million.
Okay.
And during that time period, we've completed about $67 million of capital improvements. So it's a pretty small amount.
So related to that first question Garrett asked, just to take this elementary line item in the calc sheet as an example, if you have a facility capacity of 450, so you're looking ahead based on our growth projection and saying we're going to have this many students coming in. We need to kind of plan for a new facility that has a certain capacity, and then you have this student factor for single-family and multifamily. How do we determine how many, I guess I'm not understanding it completely, how we determine how many single-family homes we're counting and how many multifamily homes we're counting?
So we're not, that number doesn't represent how many we're counting. That represents how many students
Or any.
at the elementary level. In that case, if we're on A1, that number 0.133.
Yeah. So
That is the student generation rate. We estimate that 0.13 elementary students will come out of each single-family residence.
so we look at our growth projection and say a certain percentage of the population growth is going to be 11%. I think it said in here something, we get students. And so I guess I'm not seeing the connection between how many single-family homes we build in the community and multifamily homes we build and how we get to our projected student population growth. If we're projecting a certain number of new students, how does that correlate to like how many of each home type we build or plan on accommodating? Because we use the number of, or the home type to talk about how many students we get out of each unit. Does this make any sense? Maybe I'm going to phrase it in my concern. I'm worried that we're anticipating a higher number of students coming out of single-family homes, but as a community, we're driving people to live in multifamily homes. And we just adopted a comp plan that projects like 70% of our housing in the next 20 years is going to be multifamily. What happens if there's no options for families to go to single-family because of what we're doing as a community, and we end up with everybody living in multifamily all of a sudden, and then we're only charging $229 for a multifamily unit, and all of a sudden we've shorted ourselves on impact fees because, does that make sense, that concern? It sounds like maybe impact fees aren't a huge part of the problem, so it wouldn't be the end of the world, but that struck me as the single biggest issue with the shift in reduction in multifamily and increase in single family.
Yeah, and I think some of the language included in our plan suggests that if we saw significant changes in the assumptions that we've made here, we would come back and ask the city if they would consider an amendment to our plan. So that includes...
You could do that anytime, right?
Any
Once a
year.
year, you could come back if conditions warranted it.
Yeah. It's
Okay.
something the district should monitor because you're absolutely right. We are going to be building a lot of multifamily housing, and housing is getting more expensive in Bellingham, and it's
Yeah.
going to drive families into multifamily housing, I think. And so, yeah, it's something
Yeah.
the district should monitor fairly closely.
That to me, that just struck me as, it's not like a fatal flaw or anything. It just struck me when I was looking at this is because we just came off this comp plan growth discussion, and we're going to make it cheaper for people to build multifamily and more expensive for them to build single family, and we're going to expect them to live in multifamily homes. I can see that shift happening. So, Steve?
Just following on another part of that argument, I'm concerned about the increase, or the relatively small $388 for the single-family unit. We've been here for the last 4 or 5 months. We've talked about affordable housing in Bellingham. And we've heard a lot of people throwing rocks and stones at developers, the greedy bunch, that they're not building something that's accessible or affordable for anybody. But yet, here we go, before a nail is pounded or a shovel full of dirt is turned, we require a builder to pay near $30,000 for the privilege of building a single-family house. And here on one side, we want to make it affordable, and then they got a $30,000 bill on top of it before he's ever done anything. All we're doing is keep raising these prices and making the single-family home ownership, it's not affordable anymore. But yet we keep piling on these costs. And I'm not naive enough to think that a developer is going to eat any of these things. They're going to pass it on to the new homeowner. I mean, what's the old saying? Corporations don't pay taxes, people do. And this is what I see. I see all the work on affordable housing. We just keep raising and raising and raising the price. And that's what I see right here. It's another $388 per unit. we're either at or above $30,000 to get a permit to build a single-family home. And I'm really disappointed that every time we turn around, we're seeing costs increase that our first homeowners can't handle. That's those are my feelings. Just wanted to vent, put my soapbox aside.
Steve, I would only say that in response that there is a provision in the impact fee ordinance that allows us to exempt truly affordable housing. If it's affordable according to our definition of affordable, the city's definition, the state's definition, then we do have the ability to waive the fees in that case. So if the Opportunity Council is building housing or the Land Trust is building housing and it is truly affordable and will remain so, we can exempt those units from the fees.
Well, that's good news. Thank you.
When I was looking at that table, one of the things that struck out to me was that, the decrease in cost on the multifamily kind of shows that there's objectivity to the analysis that goes into, creating these fees. I just hope that, the assumptions that are made through that analysis prove to be correct, but it sounds like there is some flexibility to make adjustments as you go, which, could be important because we do have changing demographics in our community, and a lot of the permits that are being issued this year are, heavily on the multifamily side, and housing is expensive. You bring up good concerns. There's going to be more students living in those houses, but it sounds like we can react to that. You may know or may not know, like in the analysis that the demographers do that you guys hired to do these studies, I mean, just generally, how do they do, a sampling? I mean, is it citywide where they go through, by neighborhood, or is when they're looking at establishing how many students live in particular housing forms?
Actually, track number of permits that were issued both at multi and single-family units over the last 5 years. Could you open your microphone? Sorry, I'm not used to. So they track the number of permits both on multi and single-family houses, units, and then they correlate property by property whether we have any students enrolled in those at those addresses. So it's an address by address analysis.
Oh, wow. Okay. And it's done on new construction over that period of time.
New construction over a 5-year period. I wouldn't want to do it, really. It sounds like pretty tedious work.
Sounds laborious.
Yeah.
But, All right. Well, thank you.
Do we have one?
I'll make a motion. I move to accept the findings of fact, conclusions, recommendations contained in the October 15th, 2015 staff report as written, and forward recommendation of approval to the City Council.
A second.
We have a motion and a second. The motion was to approve the findings of fact and recommendations and move them on to the City Council as written. And that includes this is just as an aside, that includes the comprehensive plan text edits as well. It's all part of the one package, right, Greg? We don't have to approve that separately.
No, it's all
Okay.
part of the package.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on that?
I have one little picky note.
You bet.
In the comprehensive plan capital facilities packet on page 50, fourth paragraph, it says the district provides basic education programs in 154 elementary schools. Is that really true?
That's actually, it's changing 14 to 15, so the
Nobody struck out the 4.
the 4's got a little strikeout, you just can't see it.
Ah,
It's there.
It's going to take a lot of impact fees to get 154 schools.
that's what I just want you to know I read.
Well, is there any other comment? I would say that we are tasked with reviewing this in the context of 5 criteria that are comprehensive plan amendment criteria, and they're in the packet. I'm sure we all saw them in the packet. I think that the school district does a good job for this community, and like Ron said, we've got the money we need, independent of these impact fees, to move forward and continue to do that. So I think that when you read through, this is just as an individual member of the commission, when you read through these 5 criteria, that the staff analysis is accurate and that we do meet these criteria. I do share the same concerns regarding impact fees that Garrett and Steve raised, and make sure that we continue to look at that, because I do believe that people in the community, particularly in regards to single-family development, are concerned about the cost. And I know that's a lot more than just the school district. And so that might generate some heartburn in certain segments of the community. But Garrett, you're right, it's offset by a significant multifamily reduction, and that's going to help a lot of people get projects done affordably. So just something to keep your guys' finger on the pulse, I guess, in my opinion. And, with that, no further comments. I'll support the motion.
Yeah, I'm going to support it, obviously. My objections go far beyond just what's here tonight. My objections are to the total permitting process, the costs involved to establish some affordable housing in this city. It doesn't exist, and we need to do some work there. We need to do some work. A lot of young couples out there that some of the students want to continue to stay in Bellingham. They can't. There's no jobs. There's no place to live. So it's an overall problem, and I think we've done a pretty good job of addressing some of those issues over the past 4 or 5 months, and I'm glad we had the opportunity. And like I say, I wanted to pull out my soapbox and just put that on the record. I'm concerned about it. Thank you.
All right, so no additional comment or discussion. We have a motion on the table, and I'll restate it. Jeff, unless you want to restate it. Let me find it here. So the motion is to adopt the findings of fact, inclusions and recommendations, and move them on to the council for approval, including conference plan text amendments. There's a motion and a second. Let's have a vote. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, carries unanimously. Go get them. And with that, we will end our public hearing. Thank you, Ron. Greg,
Thank you.
old new business, anything to talk about?
Let's see, we will be coming back to you in December, more than likely, with the work that we've been doing on ADUs. We're meeting with the focus group again this month. We've met with the technical group a couple of times. We've got a series of, you'll recall that we went through and created a matrix of issues that we heard, concerns and opportunities with ADUs, and what we've done is look at what other jurisdictions do to address those issues. So we'll have all of that information compiled for you. We've also gotten feedback at the 2 open houses that we've held on the comp plan on ADUs. So we're going to be bringing all of that information back to you in December and seeking some direction on which ways you want us to go in terms of actually crafting a new ordinance. So that'll be something I know that you've wanted to talk about for a while. So we're happy that we're at that point. We've also got a requirement for you to get some training on the Open Public Meetings Act. I know we talk about that with you when you're first appointed and if questions come up, but we're required to do some training with you. So I think we've got a video, a 20-minute video that we'll schedule for an upcoming meeting, just as a reminder, rules about open public meetings and not getting together and discussing things outside of the public eye. So we'll do that for you at an upcoming meeting as well. I think that's everything that I have at this point.
Jeff?
I have a question, and I'll see what the other commission members think about it, but when we had the ADU discussion before, there was some of the just deeper discussion was deferred because the rental registration was just coming online, and there wasn't any data on how many legal or registered ADUs there were. And since that deadline's come and passed, and presumably you've got most of them signed up, is there a way to get a GIS overlay or a map or something that shows us where the registered ADUs are, so we have an idea of the density and distribution of those in the city. I think that'd be very useful for our conversation and probably very useful for the public to see too, as we talk about where they are, where they can go, what impact they have, that sort of thing. Does anybody else think that would be useful?
Excellent idea, Jeff.
Yeah.
Excellent idea.
Yeah, we had, at our first meeting, we had some kind of graphic showing, was it maybe what had been applied for or permitted?
Permitted,
Yeah.
yeah.
So now what you're talking about is looking at what's really out there, what's existing. Yeah, that would be good. I mean, the context of illegal ADUs really kind of taints the discussion. So it would be nice to have a distinction of a lot of the complaints that we heard, or a lot of the inertia to changing the ADU ordinance was based on illegal ADUs.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as a follow-up question, that I would just, it would be interesting to be prepared to answer that if it comes up, or let's make it come up. And that is, out of the registered ones, when you have the chart or the map, how many people have attempted to register what would otherwise be an illegal ADU? In other words, the registration process has made them come clean. They've actually gone and applied for a permit or to grandfather in or to memorialize a previously illegal ADU, and they feel that it meets the requirements. Because I don't know how big of an issue that was. I don't know if all of a sudden 1,000 applications have flooded the city to try to turn a previously illegal ADU into a legal one, or whether the illegal ones kind of went away and just stopped renting out the room, and they're off the table. And that was one of those issues where it was a big unknown before, but I presume now you have a sense of where things are on that. And that'd be good to get an update, I think.
Yeah.
For me at least.
I agree. And Greg, just maybe you don't know the answer now, but if someone were to have an illegal ADU that they were renting, and they came in and registered the unit through the registration process, it doesn't really ask for a lot of information when you register. When does that enforcement, that enforcement hasn't occurred yet, I'm assuming. So if I had an illegal ADU, which I don't, I could come in and register, and then some point down the road from now, the city would go out, do their inspection, and then say, oh, wait a minute, this is
Exactly.
an ADU, not an apartment.
Yeah, just because you've registered a unit doesn't mean we've made a determination on whether or not it's legal.
Okay. The reason I
Yeah.
ask is we might not have all that data at this
Yeah,
point. We might not know.
We will give you all the data that we have. I'm not sure how detailed it's going to be, because we got 16,000 units to go through.
Yeah, and I wasn't, I understand there'll be a number of units where people register them, not realizing that there's a minimum height or the minimum egress
Sure.
windows and all that. But there are also ones that are just out and out zoning violations, essentially, where somebody probably has a very good idea that they're not legit and they're not going to be legit. And that's kind of the number that I'm interested in, what that overhang is that's going to go away.
Well, I agree. I think everybody does that. Some data would be really helpful, Greg, because it does frame the issue. And a lot of the public comment we heard, Gary, you're right, was we want to know what they wanted like a snapshot in time. The public did. So,
Yeah.
So nothing in November?
Yeah, that was my question.
Is that your?
Anything in November?
Yeah, we got a tentative schedule on the 19th,
Nothing for the 5th.
nothing for the 5th, is that correct?
Nope, nothing for the 5th. The 19th, we may be able to get ADUs to you by the 19th. It just depends on sort of what happens at our last focus group meeting, then that's going to be on October 28th. So if we can turn around everything that we need to do for you by the 19th, it's possible we could do ADUs that night.
Okay.
What about December? There's nothing there. It's one of the worst months in the year, of course.
December would be if we go on the 19th of November, December would be a follow-up on ADUs. It's probably going to take us more than one meeting to work our way through those issues.
And I won't be here on the 19th or whatever that.
17th.
17th.
Either will I.
December
Yeah,
17th?
Right.
We should avoid that if we can.
Yeah, I will be gone on the
We generally do
17th.
try and avoid that second
Yeah.
meeting in December if possible.
So we probably won't be looking at subdivisions and circling back to the comprehensive plan stuff until after the new year. Is that kind of the plan? And just open seats still. What's the status of our situation here? Is it?
I talked with the mayor's office. I haven't heard, actually, I left a voicemail for the mayor's office. I haven't heard back. I don't know if if the mayor has selected a candidate or if she has some in mind. Cerise did say that she would be willing to come to a couple of meetings if we're not in a position to replace her at this point, which would be really helpful. So depending on the feedback I get from the mayor's office, Cerise may join us for those last couple of meetings this year.
So if you're a member of the public and you're interested, then you should go talk to the mayor's office.
Yes, you can go online and
Go
fill
online,
out an
yeah.
application form and submit it to the mayor's office. That'd be great.
Great. All right. Well, thank you. Any other comments, questions?
All of our meetings get done by 7:40, so it's a great gig.
Yeah, come on down. Okay, well, with that, we will adjourn, and this will be the record, I think. Fastest. Thank you, everyone.